welcome. In Seattle, some high school teachers are in rebellion, refusing to give their students the standardized tests, which they claim don't measure learning, waste precious class time, and are being used to evaluate not just the students, but them. There are reverberations of this in New York right now. We'll take a cram course in that shortly. Also today, we'll meet the creator of a frank documentary about gentrification called My Brookyln. It focuses on the fate of the Fulton Mall. And we'll enjoy some stunning New York moments captured by photographer Ken Brown. Spontaneous moments Photoshop could not improve. First, education. The Seattle schools are seeing a dramatic show of resistance to the kind of standardized testing that began with No Child Left Behind and continues to this day. But the resistance has parallels here. New York state law mandates that teachers be evaluated in part on how well students score on such tests. The teachers union here doesn't like this either. What's the battle really about, and where does it stand now? Joining us, Felissa Kramer, managing editor of GothamSchools.org, and Principal Sean Feeney from Wheatley School on Long Island. He's a co-author of a popular open letter protesting the state law. The letter has won the support of more than 1/3 of New York State principals. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
And Felissa, first, remind us about state law. For people who've been following this conflict in the city between the UFT and the mayor over evaluations, I thought it was settled. There was a deal basically between Governor Cuomo and the UFT, and we knew what percentages of teacher evaluations were going to be based on standardized tests, didn't we?
I think a lot of people were confused by the way that things went down in Albany and their relationship to what's happening here in the city. So the deal in Albany last year was between Cuomo and NYSET, which is the state teachers union, not the city's teachers union. That deal set out a framework for what all districts' evaluation systems would have to look like. It mandated that some portion would be based on standardized test scores, but it also said to each district, you need to pick other tests that you use to grade teachers, and you need to adopt new rubrics, models for doing observations, and you need to figure out, you need to fill in all of these blanks, and they left a lot of blanks.
Because there were blanks, as you say. There was some flexibility in the formula that the state worked out. Tell me if these are the right numbers. 20% of an evaluation would be based on standardized tests, 20% on district level assessments, so I guess that's some kind of tests that the district at the local level would come up with, and then 30 to 60% on observed assessments. So that is principals and others watching teachers in their classrooms, correct?
Yeah, pretty much. Within each of those sections, there's a lot of nuance that isn't captured right there, and I think that's part of what's made moving forward here in the city so difficult.
But those are the rough outlines. 60% for principal evaluation, those measures that the principals value in the district, 20% for local assessments, 20% for state assessments. And certainly from our point of view, the original deal between NYSET and the state education department did give a level of flexibility. I think Governor Cuomo got involved when he was frustrated by the lack of districts adopting an APPR plan. And the reason why districts were struggling to adopt such plans, not because they didn't have plans already. Let's make it clear. Teachers were being evaluated. We did not need, there was an evaluation plan on the books. Every district was required to have it. So all of that occurred and was happening in districts. But this piece of using test scores to evaluate teachers was the most notable part that was really different in what NYSET and state ed had to say. And in this area where there's a lot of reform going on at the state level, a lot of changes, that's where our one issue is with the use of student test scores to evaluate teachers.
So how does this affect you as a principal? One might think you want to be able to evaluate your teachers, see how the test scores of the kids in the classrooms are coming out, use that other 30 to 60% flexibility that you have as a principal to observe teachers and decide how well they're doing. How does this hurt you?
Well, you know, it's interesting because anyone who has worked with me as an administrator says, well, of course you use student test scores. I use student test scores to evaluate teachers. It's always been the case, long before New York State's new APPR plan. So I've used student test scores. We've looked at test scores. I've had conversations with teachers. I've evaluated teachers. I've let teachers go. We've put teachers on improvement plans. In good schools, all of that was happening. What happened at the state level was a decision to really prescribe how that's being done. And you will use test scores in this way. Now, why is that a problem? No research really points to our ability to determine effectively how teachers are impacting student test scores. And it doesn't seem to make sense, but that's what the research supports. The research says we can't use student test scores to evaluate teachers in a meaningful way. We don't know how to do it consistently, and we don't know how to do it effectively. So we're making decisions
So your
using a tool
position
that we
is
don't know.
you can tell by looking at the test scores, the standardized test scores of the students in a class, this gives you no information about how good the teacher is.
Yeah, I've never said that. It gives us information. That's why I've always used it, but I don't want to use it, and I don't need to use it in this very prescribed format. The bottom line is, as we will hear over and over again from a lot of folks involved in education reform, teachers are the most important factors in a student's learning. And that's true.
In the school. Maybe parents are a more important factor.
Thank you. Teacher impact is really only about 15%, at most, 10 to 15% of students' learning. When you look inside a school, yes, it's the most important factor, more important than the principal, more important than the environment, the color of the walls. But when you look at the totality of a student's experience, you can't compare what happens in a classroom to the life that a student is living, an ability to have a meal, heat, so on and so forth.
Nevertheless, 10 to 15% is a lot.
It's not insignificant, absolutely. And we want to make sure that teachers in every classroom are effective and do the best for kids. But this is not the way to do it, because the way this is set up, Brian, is that there's some sort of understanding that if I'm your math teacher, your success or failure rests solely on my shoulders. That's not how schools are set up. That's not how we know schools work best. Schools work best when there's collaboration, not competition. Johnny's success might be because of my math scores, but it might be because he spent a lot of time with our attendance coordinator working on issues to get him to school on time. It might be because he worked with the counselor to help him work through the death of his aunt or his father. There's so many, a physical therapist, a resource room teacher, go on and on and on. So there are a lot of other reasons, but the success or failure is pinned right to one single teacher, and research doesn't support that.
Felissa, what have the main sticking points been between the UFT here in the city and Mayor Bloomberg as they've been going back and forth on this in recent weeks?
So neither side has been super open about what the sticking points have been, but one thing that really hasn't been part of the discussion has been the use of test scores. The value added or growth model that Sean was talking about, that was set in state law, wasn't part of the conversations.
Settled issue.
It's a settled issue as far as the negotiations happening in the city were concerned. Some of the places where they got stuck were, especially around how to do observations. The state law mandates that at least one observation should be unannounced. A surprise for the teacher. That would be new for teachers here. And a big thing where the union and the mayor, I think, may never have come together on was whether after an observation a principal would be required to speak with the teacher that he's observed. This city's position, I think, was that that would be a great conversation to have. Principals should be encouraged to do it, to make it a requirement. Is a huge paperwork burden for principals. It's a huge time suck. And they're not going to be able to do all of the new observations they need to do if they have that requirement as well. And I think the time burden has been real.
Right, but you know what? This is what people are losing sight of, I think, at times. I I don't do announced observations. All of my observations are unannounced, and I've done full period ones unannounced. I've already done this year over 80 unannounced observations. Pop in, have conversations, always. 80 observations with 80 conversations within 2 days of that visit.
How common is that,
That's
by
good
the way?
practice.
Because I have friends who are teachers who have, you know, I know they've been, like the principal is coming to observe me on Thursday, so I'm preparing this great lesson plan.
Right. I don't believe in dog and pony shows. I think instruction, and good instruction can take many different forms. I've walked in and stayed during the administration of an exam to see how that's being done and had worthwhile conversations.
So what about this
That's
idea
good practice.
of a requirement that you then have a conversation with the
Absolutely.
teacher after the fact?
We have no problems with that. Our problem, once again, and our concern is in all that's being done in Albany, Common Core, teaching and learning standards, graduation standards, we're very supportive. We're critical friends, but we're supportive. This letter, though, was born out of frustration because we find this to be such an important issue that we felt we had to speak out. And when you are the commissioner and a third of your principals have signed on very publicly, and we know there's easily twice as many who won't sign on because they are fearful of repercussions, that should cause one to at least pause and perhaps ask the question, are there other ways? And you know what? Other states are doing this differently. Massachusetts has a very different formula. Montgomery County has a different way of evaluating teachers. This was not the only way to do it. This was the way we chose to do it. State Ed chose to do it.
Felissa, how typical is he?
There are great principals, and I've heard about principals in the city who do exactly that, always in classrooms, always having conversations about practice, always trying to help teachers get better. But I also hear the exact opposite, and I hear it a lot. You know, I haven't been observed all year. Nobody ever comes in and asks me, what do I need to help me get better? You know, exactly what you said. I have an observation coming up. I'm planning this great lesson. My students know, and they told me they're going to be really on their best behavior.
I'm going to give them 5 bonus points.
And then on Friday, we're going to watch a movie. So I hear that also, and I think that the implementation of an evaluation system, if you're going to have one, really does depend on principals. And here in the city, I think that the training or the quality control hasn't happened to be prepared to carry out new evaluations in a really excellent way.
New York State has some of the top schools in this country. You look at any of those lists of top 100 schools, top whatever schools, Intel semifinalists, whatever it might be, any metric you choose, New York State is always at or near the top. We have wonderful models. Our opinion was never asked. What is your model of supervision like? How do you evaluate teachers? I don't use test scores in this prescribed manner, in what I perceive as punitive manner. We use them in a thoughtful manner. I've had teachers approach me and have conversations with me when their AP scores have been lower and say, listen, Sean, I know we have to have a conversation about this. Let's talk about it. And we understand. And the following year, things go back. You know, what's happening is, do you know how long students were tested for in grades 3 through 8 last year? Almost 6 hours over a 2-week period. 6 hours of testing to determine whether or not they were proficient in mathematics and English. That's more than they get tested for the ACT, for the SAT, for AP exams, for the LSATs, for the MCATs. That's a lot of testing, and we're seeing this proliferation of testing.
This is exactly what the Seattle teachers are protesting too.
Enough is enough.
But what are you actually asking for from the state in your letter to the state, since we thought that this was established already at the state level in terms of what percentage would be evaluated, what percentage of a teacher's performance would be evaluated based on the kids' standardized
What
tests?
we've asked for, and we did put forth several recommendations. First and foremost, we wanted more of a building-wide metric, recognition that effective schools are schools where professionals are working with each other, working together in collaboration. So come up with a metric that matters to you, to your district, to your school, because you know what? Schools in Long Island are different from the schools in the city, different from the schools upstate, in the sense that we can have a common view of this is what you need to show. So Maybe for some schools, they're working on their graduation rates. Maybe that's an important metric for me as a high school principal. Maybe other schools are working on their mathematics or their English scores, or they want to show, fewer suspensions, or they want to show other improvement in the SAT, ACT, or some other national test. So you could get together some sort of index where you are combining perhaps some state standards, some state results with some local measures that matter, and that then gets part of every teacher's evaluation.
So that's time spent, that's effective, accurate evaluations. Felissa, are teachers also complaining that standardized testing gets in the way of how they teach?
There was a lot of concern about the proliferation of standardized testing in the city. Last year, we heard about families who were opting out of taking the tests. And we heard about some sympathetic teachers and principals who, they could have penalized the families and chose not to. Then we also heard about the field tests where students were taking an extra test that didn't count, that would review the quality of tests for future administrations. And there were more families and even some schools that opted out of
So
that.
how does this affect the relationship between teachers and students? Does it?
Absolutely. That is in our letter. It changes that relationship, because when a student now impacts your ability to maintain your job, and that student is struggling with whatever issues our adolescents struggle with, and there are a myriad of issues, it no longer becomes teacher and student against the test. It becomes teacher against the student against the test. And teachers, I think, are remarkable. I spent many years in the classroom. I have the utmost respect, but we've created a system that incentivizes, whether it happens or not, it certainly incentivizes certain thoughts, certain actions. Whoa, you're putting Johnny in my class? Johnny never comes to school. Why? You can't put him in my class. You're going to kill my end-of-year evaluation because he's not going to do well in the test. Or why are you letting him challenge himself in this course? He's not going to do well in the test. Bottom line, Brian, there's not another country that evaluates teachers based on student test scores. Why is it that we feel the need to do it? Countries look up to us and our system. We're creating a system that no other country does based on this false
I thought in some of the
understanding.
Asian countries, the stakes are very high with the standardized test. If anything, it's more regimented. It's not?
But they're not evaluating teachers. The stakes are high for the students. And when you are, when that test is going to determine your ability to enter this school or that school, yeah, the stakes are very high.
But that isn't a disconnect to say the student's performance is measured by these tests, but then the teacher's performance is not
No,
measured?
it's not the student's performance. It's the student's ability to get in. We do the same thing with colleges. We use tests as part of whether or not a college can get in. Those schools in those countries where we look up to for their educational prowess, and most recently everyone's talking about Finland, the Finland miracle. Well, they don't use test scores. They respect the market. They pay teachers well. They assess, they support them, and they have strong teachers unions.
We're out of time, except, Felissa, are we doomed to be having the same debate year after year after year forever? Or are they ever actually going to settle this in New York State and everybody's going to be satisfied?
I think, I think we're doomed to have the same conversation, at least for the near term. And then the winds will change and we'll have a different conversation on the same topic. I think that's how education policy has been made for a long time, and this is what's in vogue now, and a different version of this will be in vogue later.
Do you expect more militancy around the country like we've seen in Seattle, very briefly?
Yeah, I think people are recognizing, parents are recognizing the problems associated with some of these reforms and that they're not really reforms. And I just want to point out, because I liken this, back in the 80s and 90s, politicians who stood up against capital punishment, 3 strikes you're out, they were weak on crime, soft on crime. People are viewing those things very differently now.
Well, we'll see if more teachers around the country, maybe even here, refuse to administer standardized tests, as has now happened in Seattle. Thank you both very much for talking about this with us. The neighborhoods of New York City are always changing, and now at a speed and scale not seen since Robert Moses. Whether it's progress or not depends on your point of view. And whether you're moving in or getting forced out, My Brookyln is a provocative new documentary film about gentrification from a self-described gentrifier. If you missed the sold-out New Year's run at the Rerun Theater in Brooklyn, you will get a second chance. We'll tell you about it shortly. The film looks at the central shopping district in the borough, the Fulton Mall, and asks us to consider, do we like what New York City is becoming? After this glimpse of the film, we'll talk to the filmmaker and we'll see more of My Brooklyn.
It was true that my neighbors from the upscale surrounding communities weren't shopping at Fulton Mall. Even so, the area was hugely profitable. It had long been known as the third most successful shopping district in New York City, right after Fifth Avenue and Madison Avenue in Manhattan. I decided to talk to people in my neighborhood to find out how they felt about the mall.
The Fulton Mall? Oh, I don't shop there, if that's what you're asking. It's kind of run down and the stores aren't very good, so I wouldn't really go there to shop.
I think the Fulton Mall is a great space. I'm a sneaker lover and I'm a fashion lover, and being able to dip in and dip out and get that experience with the Pakistani Indian man, the Asian person, the McDonald's, Macy's, that mix up, that's Brooklyn, that's Fulton Mall.
I didn't know you could get a Scarface beach towel, but you can, apparently, on the Fulton Street Mall.
It's the third most successful shopping area in New York City.
Well, you know, McDonald's sells a whole lot of hamburgers, too. That doesn't mean they're any good.
I don't want to see it go. A lot of people like the Fulton Mall. My daughter, my grandchildren love to go there to shop, and it's been there for a long time.
I think it's a really weird space, and I don't know how to interact with it, and I think they should just make it go away. But I'm also worried, I mean, maybe it's like a race thing, too, because, you know, it seems like people do shop there. So maybe there's stuff for African Americans that I don't know. Maybe that's part of it. It kind of feels like it might be.
It may not be aesthetically appealing for someone to go there now, but some people have had roots here for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you know? So what do we tell them? Oh, well, you don't matter because this new person who's been here for 6 months has enough money to say you should be gone?
Some excerpts from My Brooklyn. With us to talk about the film and the issues it explores is director, co-producer, and diehard Brooklynite, Kelly Anderson. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Why'd you make this film?
Oh gosh, I made the film because I moved to Brooklyn in 1988 and lived in a variety of neighborhoods that I saw go through this massive transformation. You know, a lot of it was good, reinvestment, a lot of good, cool businesses moving in, and but then I also started to see this displacement of the existing community, and just to sort of ask myself if there was a way to think about this that would allow me to figure out the politics of it and what was going on and what could my role be besides just sort of feeling weird about where I was living. And then I heard about the redevelopment of Fulton Mall, which was a very thriving commercial space in the middle of downtown Brooklyn, and started digging around about why the city felt the need to rezone the third most profitable shopping district in New York City. And that was the investigation that became My Brooklyn.
People hear that stat when you say it, and they think, wait, Fulton Mall, the third most profitable shopping district in the city? We have Fifth Avenue, we have 34th Street. This is going to be number 3 with those low-end stores?
Well, Fifth Avenue is the top, I think, and Madison Avenue second. And I was shocked by it too, but those figures come from the city. So they're not something that I came up with.
Because what's selling?
Well, 100,000 people a day were shopping there, at least before the city rezoned it in 2004. I'm not sure what the figures are today, but there's still a lot of people going down there. But it was really the main shopping and cultural space in downtown Brooklyn, and I think that was one of the points we try to make in the film. Is it's not just about shopping, it's also about other things people do in spaces, socialize, hang out, and have all kinds of community interactions that are also part of what makes a city.
And part of the big picture that the film addresses is the massive rezoning citywide during the Bloomberg years. So we're going to play a clip right now of Mayor Bloomberg talking about what he had in mind 5 years ago.
2002, the city announced that big changes were in the works for downtown Brooklyn.
New York is in a fierce competitive worldwide competition. We must offer the best product and sell it forcefully. We'll launch the Downtown Brooklyn Development Plan, giving it room to grow for the next century. When completed, it will make Brooklyn a rival of Los Angeles for office space. Take that for stealing our Dodgers.
Correction, that was more than 5 years ago. That was 2002.
Yes.
And the mayor's vision for downtown, he sounded very determined there. He was trying to settle the score with somebody from Los Angeles from the 1950s, it sounded like, but he sounded very determined. How'd it work out?
Well, you'll notice that he mentions office jobs. So the downtown Brooklyn rezoning was sold as a plan for commercial office space and 18,000 permanent jobs. What we got were no office buildings and a whole lot of luxury condos, about 6,300 luxury units of housing just in that small area. So, you know, part of what the film talks about is how a plan could be sold as one thing, morph into something else, and there's really very little oversight and accountability or anybody, you know, going back and saying, well, you know, you promised this and we got this other thing. So part of the film, what the film talks about is that economic development is being done around these sort of ideas that I'm not sure anybody's really following up how it's playing out on the ground.
Why is luxury condo development inherently bad, if you think it is? If there are that many wealthy people in the city who can afford that many, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars plus apartments, then why doesn't that indicate that the city is actually doing something right?
Well, that's what people from the city often say, but to me the question is nobody assessed what the need was for housing in the city. First of all, we don't need luxury housing as much as we need middle-income housing, for example. You know, I don't think the argument...
But you have to stop developers from putting up luxury housing, right? Because they will do it.
Well, no, but I think if the city's going to give hundreds of millions of dollars in tax breaks to these developers and then by extension to the people who buy these condos, then we should be getting some public benefit back. And these developers built these condos with, in most cases, no affordable housing, even the unaffordable affordable housing that is usually built. So it was a huge giveaway to developers. And also, I believe, and a lot of people who do more community-based planning believe that in downtown Brooklyn, you could have approached it in a way where you could have had luxury condos, you could have changed things, but in a way that built on the existing strengths. And what the city did in downtown Brooklyn was say, this isn't working, we don't like it, it's not consistent with our vision, we're gonna erase it and put a whole new community of people and different kind of retail there. And I think the question is more, how do you integrate the old with the new in a way that's equitable and lets us maintain a sense of our roots and our history?
I think one of the beautiful things about the film is that you capture the connection of some of the small business people in the area, Korean store owner, a black barbershop owner, to some of the kids growing up there who've now gone on to the London School of Economics and all this stuff. So we want to play a clip again from my Brooklyn, of some of the people who these businesses have catered to and their sense of the change that's on the way.
Come to Fulton Mall, Hoyt and Fulton, where the sales are always famous. It's what you need. The belt man, 11 years, got socks. Everybody needs socks.
We have the fried bake with saltfish. We have curry chicken, curry potatoes, stew beef, curry shrimp, curry beef, oxtail, dumplings.
I just retired and I moved to Delaware, and I come all the way from Delaware to Brooklyn to get my hair done.
Even with the bad parking, I'm still willing to take her here because she loves to shop so much.
This is A&B Bookstore. We specialize more in African American, you know. That's the community we really serve. So if somebody wants to know about the Caribbean history, this is the place that they come. It's a place of learning.
We call it urban fiction. I guess they make a lot of comparisons to the hip-hop music. They said these are hip-hop in words.
Young kids, they will wear this type of colors in the church. The older men will wear this color. They like the basic colors, the black, the gray, the blues, you know. I kind of what we call the Godfather style. A lot of the ministers on television, you see them wear a lot of these nice long suits, different colors and stuff like that. Back in the days, they call it zoot suits.
Things are going amazingly in downtown Brooklyn. Downtown Brooklyn really over the last 18 to 24 months has reemerged as one of New York City's premier retail destinations. You know, we've got Shake Shack coming. We've got a creperie that's opening at 80 DeKalb Avenue. We've got a Smash Burger that's opening in the same building. We've had an expansion of Brookyln Fair, which is downtown Brooklyn's first supermarket, and very dynamic emergence of the Chef's Table there, which was the first eatery in Brooklyn ever to get 2 Michelin stars.
We have a great desire and a pent-up demand for the same kind of shopping everybody else has. And so when the right physical and demographic and logistical setup presents itself, we can see those big boxes kind of swooping in. And we have an influx of regular mall stores that's really going to put the mall back in Fulton Mall.
Another excerpt from My Brooklyn, filmmaker Kelly Anderson with us in the studio. So here's my question. Can you envision the guy who buys the pink bowler hat to go with the matching suit and the new residents who are going to go to the creperie and the Shake Shack hanging out, if not with each other, in the same neighborhood as each other, and it becoming a mixed-use area?
Well, sure. I mean, New York City is a city of neighborhoods, right? I mean, I asked myself a lot when I was making the film, why do I care if Fulton Mall is there or not? I don't go and buy those goods in the wig store, for example. But to me, the beauty of New York is that you could wander through neighborhoods adjacent to one another that were different and had their own local character and culture. And so there was something, to me, really great about that.
But wouldn't that
urban
neighborhood
fabric.
be somewhere, even if that particular area of Brooklyn gentrifies? Then it's going to be somewhere else further into the borough or whatever?
Maybe, but these are people who have 3 generations now in Brooklyn who held it together during some very rough years, you know, with no access to capital or anything. So here they came to downtown Brooklyn when, as someone says in the film, nobody wanted to be here and made it this gem. You know, there's such great entrepreneurship, you know, down there. And so to me, to just say, move your business somewhere else, I mean, it's very hard. In fact, none of them have been able to. You know, very few have moved successfully because people, their customers don't know where to find them.
And let's show one more clip of a Korean shop owner in the area.
I've gone to the Brooklyn Chamber of Commerce, and I've spoken to the people in charge of development, and they told me, don't worry about it. There's nothing to worry about. We haven't even been approached about your block. This was about 6 months ago. So 5 months later, I got a note in the mail that said I must be out in 30 days.
Please take notice that you are hereby required to quit, vacate, and surrender possession of the subject premises to the landlord by September 30th, 2007. If we don't get out, LeBeau's may send a marshal here to put a chain in the door to evict us.
What we're being offered is nothing. No, nothing to relocate, nothing to move our equipment, nothing to store our equipment. So we're sort of in a bind.
Someone else bought this building with lot of money. Very soon, I think I have to move out to find out some place. I have 2 kids in college. One is in London School of Economics, and one is in Williams College, second one. I have to support them, you know. For that, I spent like, how long, 20 years to build up this business, and now I have to move. Then I might lose all the customers.
Well, Equities did what they have to do as far as they sold it, because it's business, it's strictly business. But I think they should have gave us a little bit more leeway and told us what was going on so we can prepare to do something else if that's what we wanted to do.
Very soon downtown Brooklyn is going to be McDonald's, Taco Bell, and big corporations. There's not going to be no individual owners down here.
Maybe they'll have an equity firm for us that we'll be able to get money from. Yeah, I mean, we've invested money in here. We've kept this place up, and we made it also.
I invest my life here, my friend. I invest my life, 26 years, all right? When you have a business and you sell business, you get money. I got nothing.
So, correction, I thought that was just going to be the one shop owner who was in the middle of that clip. Obviously, we saw a lot of people there talking again about the value of the neighborhood. And is it just that they're being kicked out, or is it also the lack of democracy, the lack of voice that they have in the fate of their own stores in their own neighborhood?
Yeah, I mean, a rezoning like this is very hard on small businesses because they're renting. And I should say that those businesses, most of them had long-term leases that were broken abruptly with 30 days notice. So there's a lot of small business owners who had just sunk $20,000, $25,000 into their shop to suddenly just be told you got to go. And you know, the city promised up and down that they were going to help them when the hearings happened for the plan, but in the end there was really nobody to help any of them. So there was a complete lack of regard. I mean, I think that the impact could have been mitigated, and you know, and it wasn't.
And your film is about this one neighborhood, but your point is that rezonings like this have taken place all over the city in the last 10 or 12 years, right? So
Yeah.
you think there are similar battles, similar gains, similar losses being fought neighborhood by neighborhood?
Yes, look at the rezoning of 125th Street in Harlem. I mean, talk about a cultural legacy that's being lost there through a rezoning. Exactly the same thing. I think that people, I don't think people have fully realized, I mean, your average person, I'm not sure they've realized what the Bloomberg legacy is in terms of land use in the city and the impact that his administration has really had on the city. Although I will say that I think similar things are going on all over the country and even globally, because ever since our film has been showing just last week, and because of the reviews, I've gotten emails through our website from people in Baltimore, DC, LA, Oakland, Chicago, Providence, Cleveland, saying come, show the film, come show the film here, we need this here. Yes. So it's a national crisis around who do cities belong to, you know, and what rights do we have to put down roots?
For people who want to go, where's your next screening?
It's going to be at Rerun Theater in Dumbo, starting January 25th, running till February 3rd. And you can go to www.mybrooklynmovie.com for information. Thanks.
Kelly Anderson, thanks a lot. Up next, extraordinary snapshots of New Yorkers on the streets after the break. For more than 30 years, photographer Ken Brown has been documenting street art and hand-painted signs all around town, as well as catching fabulous only in New York moments. He also creates short films and unique postcards and stamps. A multimedia exhibit of Brown's work is currently showing at TechServe, among the tech hardware they sell on 23rd Street. But you can get a strong sense of his colorful work even on the small screen. So let's get this gallery going. First, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And let's start showing some of your images. Tell us what we are looking at right here.
Fashion forward on Orchard Street. I really love finding moments like this that are both colorful and quixotic, and I think I got this guy just as he was opening up.
Fashion forward in a place that was fashion retro. It was a shopping district 100 years ago, too.
Absolutely.
Orchard Street. Next slide.
Impossible or nothing. This was one of those wonder moments, like I wonder how the things lined up to make this happen.
The balloons just happened to be passing by?
Just happened to be caught up in the tree.
Ah.
And this is the kind of holy grail of my photography. I look for those juxtapositions like that. And
so what was your fantasy of this shot? Did he just blow those balloons out, or was he sucking them in?
I think it's blowing them out, but it's open to any interpretation.
Next image.
City Sights, New York. And this is one of the many New York City buses, and I happened to be watching them come along, and suddenly there was a gorilla in the background and somebody kind of half asleep. I don't know, another one of those magic moments.
It's really cool, the tour bus, and then that image above the tour bus. Next slide.
Rainy Day Woman. I caught this magic moment down on the Lower East Side, and I think just the fact that her outfit matched the things in the background, and again, one of those juxtapositions that you just have to be grateful that you were there at the right time.
Beautiful. Next slide.
Traveler's Aid, and again, another one of those moments when the background and the subject lined up, and like I said, they're wonder moments. You wonder how those people were studying their tourist map at the same time the Jetsons were coming along to guide them.
Next slide.
FaceTime on the Williamsburg Bridge. I I travel over the Williamsburg Bridge fairly often and happened to come across this little moment of people studying a face.
Next slide.
This one's called Skateboard Audience, and as you may make out, that's Woody Allen down there being somewhat aware that something's going on over his shoulder.
What's Woody Allen doing there? I mean, obviously the skateboarder is the real person.
I think he was a street art piece that was just
somebody decided
there.
to paint Woody Allen there. And look at this butterfly.
This one
person.
is called Metamorphosis, and it was actually a man who was repairing a door on a side street in the Gansevoort Market area. But to have somebody doing that, unbeknownst that there were wings sprouting from his back.
So often the colors seem to inadvertently line up in these shots, like the pinkish thing over the pink tour bus, and here the orange shirt of the man and some of the orange in what looks like the butterfly wings.
Absolutely. I cherish those moments, and I genuflect to the gods of serendipity whenever that happens.
So how often in your life do you run into something like this that just happens to be there?
I have to confess, those moments are quite rare, and I wish they happened more often, but I jokingly say, well, that was my photograph for this year. I actually do take a lot more photographs. But
when did you start taking photographs of New York City?
I started when I moved here in 1985, and actually even before moving here, we lived in Boston and came down, and we would roam around, and that was when New York was visually quite a different city. And I would document the graffiti and the street art of that moment, and but I kept doing it, and I've basically been doing it ever since. Usually, at first it was walking, now I tend to bike, and I bike through all the boroughs and explore further and further each time, but it's been a consistent project.
Don't click while moving.
I try not to.
I want to show people your 3-minute street art. Oh, well, we're going to do a few more stills first, forgive me. So let's go right back in here. Who's looking at me?
I called it Ivy Eyes, and it was on a wall in Red Hook that was allegedly going to be a development. Kind of goes through their last story. There were advertisements for condominiums that would be built on the location. They turned it over to a group of street artists. But I happened to come by when somebody had actually cleared the ivy away from those eyes. And another great moment just to have caught that.
Cool. Next slide.
This was downtown on Lower 7th, and again, I love finding people doing things that sort of complement what's going on in the background. It almost looked like they were doing something with the ropes or strings, but it's funny because the next time we went down that same street, the building was gone, the ones they were standing on. And it talks about the ephemerality of New York City, and one of the things that I really like to record.
And what are those trees doing on 7th Avenue, too?
It was a little back lot.
Next slide.
And this was actually a famous British street artist named Banksy. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of him. And I happened to catch this with a dog walking along, and it kind of complemented the figure jumping rope.
Right. It was a nice line where the dog was there and the rope was there.
Right.
Very nice. You look for different things in the city than, you know, the traditional photos of skyscrapers or how the sun hits Central Park, even though some of those can be beautiful. Are you looking for certain things?
I am. I actually have probably about 30 or 40 different categories on a quite weighty hard drive these days. And they include people in pictures, people taking pictures of people. I do old storefronts, doorways of the city, hand-painted signs, a lot of what's disappearing. So I'm kind of wearing two hats. One is the artist, photographer, and the other is an archivist. I feel like I'm documenting an awful lot of New York City before it disappears. And
now we're going to show your 3-minute street art slideshow. I believe the first slide in this is called Street Art. Let's take a look. Ken Brown street art slideshow. So does it add something to the art when you're making art of the art? That is, you're taking photos of things that people have painted by and large. Does it add another dimension in your opinion, or just document it?
It's just documenting. I love street art. I love finding these in funny little places, often places that nobody ever sees. And it really speaks to the spirit of, and the need, the almost biological need to make art. And there are a lot of young people spilling out of art schools and other places who can't get into galleries, so they're the gallery of the streets. And it's a very active and vital scene in New York City.
Any street artist ever see some of these and say, hey, I want a cut of whatever you might make selling the photographs of my art?
if I ever did that. I don't make any money on it. I don't sell that.
Yeah. Do you make a living at art?
I do. I've been a publisher of postcards for 35 years, and that was sort of started what moved me to New York, but I've done postcards, T-shirts, wrapping paper.
So I want to show a couple of your postcards, and these are postcards with puns. I don't know if we can get close in on this. Okay, there we go. So Steve and Edie. And you have to have a very particular kind of viewer in order to recognize both Steve Lawrence and Idi Amin, right?
You got it. It's a pop culture quiz. You have to remember, these were published in 1984, 1985. So
when both of them were a little more current.
Recognizable.
And I don't know how many people watching right now even know that it's a riff on Steve Lawrence and Edie Gourmet, who was his partner.
You're a winner.
And this one, similarly, I bet more people will know this one, actually. We'll see if we can get a good shot of that. Ike and Tina, but it's not Ike and Tina Turner per se.
Right.
Ike is, of course, Dwight Eisenhower.
Right. And again, a pop culture quiz. This was actually, in its day, one of my most popular postcards.
You just swapped out Ikes, really, in this case,
right?
Right.
And I did a whole series of them. I called them Fun Couples.
Why were you invited to Harvard?
I'm sorry?
You did something at Harvard, right?
I did. I lived in Cambridge, and when I moved to New York, somebody who was doing work with the Harvard Business School called me and wanted me to come and talk to their students. There seemed to be an interest at that time in small businesses and using that as a model of some kind. And so they brought me up there a couple of times to talk to their business school classes. I think the interest was, there were a number of small businesses, like I remember one that made shoelaces with elaborate patterning, and I was the postcard. Maybe there was another one doing ice cream, but.
We'll show one more video collage. This is called Wall to Wall. You want to set it up?
Wall to Wall was actually an early of this kind of film. I call them chicka chicka films, which is the sound of a single frame. I edit them in the camera, so there's no cutting in afterwards. And they're literally like using the camera as a paintbrush. And this was a homage to New York City streets.
Let's see. work of artist Ken Brown. Another thing that he's done that we didn't even mention, his work has shown up on Sesame Street in various ways over the years, but we're out of time. Just tell people until when they can see the exhibit of your work at TechServe on West 23rd Street.
This show is open till February 24th every day, and it's kind of like a fun house of different screen. It was a perfect marriage between my work and their store. So you could see films that are on iPads and monitors and in a phone booth, but you have to explore.
Well, thanks for enlivening our eyes and our worlds today. It's beautiful stuff.
Thank you.
And that's it for our program for this week. We premiere a new show every Wednesday evening at 7:30. Next week, The Legacy of Internet Revolutionary Aaron Swartz. And tune in to my radio program, 10 a.m. each weekday on WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820. Tomorrow, U.S. gun laws compared to other countries. I'm Brian Lehrer. Thanks for watching.